Hey there, nerdpreneurs. Couple things about today's Talkin' Nerdy episode. This episode is Frank and I sharing some insights and reflections from our 45-minute interview with Aram, the tarantula breeder / content creator from Urban Tarantulas. If you want to listen to the full interview before listening to this Talkin' Nerdy, I'd recommend that. It is episode 3 of season 1, and I put a link in the show notes. It's a super interesting interview. Go check it out. Now, without further ado, here is today's Talkin' Nerdy.
Talking nerdy. We're just talking nerdy. With all this talking nerdy. Oh, come on.
Anyway,
I don't know what that is. I'm not a mountain guy.
It's pretty much our Vancouver Island, except it's not an island, but it does a lot of the same things that Vancouver Island does for Vancouver, where it protects it from certain weather conditions.
Tidal waves and stuff, yeah.
All the tidal waves.
Yes.
All those tsunamis that Tofino gets hit with. Same thing. Anyway.
Does it actually get hit with?
No. I mean, if it does, tsunamis, I mean, keep in mind, like, what the media tells us about tsunamis is usually inaccurate, like in movies. It's not these giant waves. Tsunamis are not giant waves on the surface of the ocean. They're giant underneath the ocean. You don't believe me.
I don't believe you at all.
You're gonna believe the movie 2012 over me, who took Earth and Ocean Sciences?
I'm not jumping directly to Hollywood science. I'm just saying I don't think you're a proper meteorologist to be saying these things. And I have watched a few documentaries on tidal waves or
natural disasters.
No, the big wave, what's the other? Tsunamis, which is the same thing as a tidal wave, right? And I've seen footage of them coming in, and it's horrifying to see how huge a wave is next to a small, tiny ant-like human. It has happened. That's just how it is.
They're natural surges. So one real quick, a crash course in wave sciences is that the wave is like this series, this pillar of circles of cylinders underneath the ocean, and they spin and they create this vertical column of horizontal turbines kind of. And so as they eventually hit the ocean floor, they start breaking, and that's what results in the breaking of a wave, because it's finally getting to a point where it can't have the current underneath the ocean. You don't care. I can tell anymore. You're over this conversation, but I'm going to educate you. I'm going to educate you. Because
I just think that your tsunami is caused by earthquakes.
If gravity was weaker, it could have giant waves. But we don't. And yes, earthquakes are the main contributing factor to tsunamis.
Yeah, that or underwater volcanoes.
Yep. That's why we get so many on this site, because we have the Pacific Ring of Fire.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. There's lots of reasons why. My question is not dumb to be asking whether or not Tofino gets hit with tsunamis, because to me it would make sense that
it's
they
not
would.
A dumb question. It's just I wanted to clear up what you thought a tsunami was.
I know what a tsunami is. It's a giant wave. That's what it is.
Damn it, Chris.
It's a giant wave. It goes across things.
All right, we're getting a meteorologist, an Earth and Ocean Science expert on this show, and that's going to be my number one question.
Here's a quick tip for you, tsunami safety, if you will. If you're at the beach and all of a sudden all of the water disappears, run. Get to the highest possible ground you can, because that is actually all the wave being sucked out, right? Yeah. And that goes high up into the air and comes flashing across the ground that is now exposed.
Yeah, totally.
Breaking, man. As you did. So I think combining our two sciences, we're pretty accurate here.
Oh, yeah, real professionals over here. But that's not why we're here. Today, we are here to talk about episode 3 with Aram of Urban Tarantulas.
It was an awesome episode, I thought, because I think, actually, you know what? I think we did this one just for me. Because I have come to like tarantulas. I have never actually handled one or touched one or owned one, but they are cool to look at.
Yes, this was very much a guest that you wanted on the show. I had very little interest. In fact, I have a healthy dose of arachnophobia. Healthy is probably not a great way to put it, but I definitely have some arachnophobia. And so when this guest, Aram, came on, I was kind of like, this seems kind of out of left field, but that's what we're all about, is finding these nerds out of left field. And I gotta say, I ended up really enjoying this talk with him, and I've really enjoyed since then following him on Instagram and seeing what he puts out. It's very good content.
Yeah, and this is sort of a double fake, because it seems like we're interviewing a tarantula breeder and like that's his main thing and what he does. But in actuality, the tarantula breeding was a method in which to create content. And the content is actually what he is spending most of his time doing, and spending most of his time actually producing, and probably where most of his money is coming from as well, is what he says too. So.
Yeah. The thing that really struck me about this that I really liked is learning about this world of tarantula breeding. And I think before talking so much about Aram and his business, I just wanted to comment on this industry has so much in it that I, of course, didn't know about. For example, the amount of crickets you need. And after looking at pictures of his operation, he's got so many like Tupperware containers, you know, large ones that'll have like an individual tarantula, and he's got so many, and he's got to feed them all.
I just couldn't believe how many spiders, one, he had, and two, how many tarantulas there are on the internet. Like, if you have tarantulas, there's a huge amount of content.
Yes.
There's like a little content pocket in like Instagram and TikTok where just people like to watch and digest tarantula content material,
There's
which is
such a
pretty
demand.
awesome.
I mean, there's a couple other people in this niche that we've stumbled upon since this episode, and it's been really interesting to see, okay, these people have, like, when you look back at their older stuff, the number of likes they've gotten and the engagement has increased very quickly.
It seems to me like tarantula breeding or tarantula content is a very fast growing market.
Yeah.
And also one that seems to have increased amount of demand, which is partly why I'm like, man, get a couple tarantulas and make content around that. Yeah. And what was funny is just even talking to one of our other episodes, Mecca, when he was talking about publishing, because you can find these niches in which to be able to publish. He was like, yeah, even that guy who was your tarantula breeder, he could make a whole book on tarantula breeding and make a whole bunch of side income. Like, there seems to be a real opportunity to monetize tarantulas. And I just, that's what Nerdpreneur is about, right? Like, how cool is it that you could find a niche that pretty weird, pretty specific, and also not something that most people would ever consider thinking of. It's like, I didn't grow up saying I want to be a tarantula breeder. It's very much something you just sort of discover about yourself, I think, as you go down life. Like, Aram's like, I just found out when I was on Reddit and saw a blue tarantula that I wanted one of those. And it like flipped a tarantula switch in his brain that now he became obsessed with it. So, man, that's I don't know, that's a cool lesson to learn, that you can be able to go into these cool markets and be able to dominate them if you got that passion.
Yeah, I mean, he really did. He said that he has the largest collection of the M. balfouri in his in the world, like largest in the world, pretty much. And that's pretty impressive. I mean, for someone to take that all the way from just, you know, starting off with a couple and then having the largest collection is very impressive. But then he's now talking about how he's kind of tired of it. He's like, yeah, the thing I really enjoy actually is the making of the content and the educating people. And that ties into the next thing that I was going to talk about, which is just how awesome it is that he loves to educate and entertain at the same time. To me, I think that's really what Nerdpreneur is really about, is people who are so nerdy they want to entertain and educate at the same time.
Yeah, I like that his mission was to, well, it's funny, because we asked him about mission. He didn't seem like he's like this hotshot business person necessarily. Like, he's followed some people like Gary Vee and been influenced by them, which is, you can see Gary Vee, his influence sort of in a lot of the people that we've interviewed, because he's always just been about like, just record and put out content. And it's not about creation. It's about documenting what you're doing. And that's really what he's doing, is documenting the things that he's creating. Like, when he's breeding, it's just like, I put a camera on. Or when he's trying to educate people a little bit on like, oh, check out the way this spider molts, right? And
Mm-hmm.
look at that. Like he's educating and just documenting what it's like to be a tarantula breeder, and that in itself, that authenticity, is creating a market where people are resonating with him and what the content is that he's creating. And it's not that hard in some ways because he's just got someone filming him while he's doing what he probably regularly does, and that's a great lesson for people. But then I like that he has this mission around making tarantulas not scary.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, you got a little arachnophobia. How have you found that being a little bit allayed by watching more of this tarantula content? Are you
Absolutely.
opening up to the idea of being a tarantula owner,
No.
or is that no, still
No,
not
I'm
there
not
with it,
gonna
eh?
own a tarantula, but I've watched enough of his stuff, and after like getting images compiled for the videos that we're gonna put up on YouTube around this, it's like wow. I have to be careful about what photos I choose because he definitely likes to take very, very close up photos with a DSLR, and so he can get all the little hairs on the spiders. Sorry, the
Hmm.
tarantulas, and that is like okay, that's beautiful, but I don't want that suddenly showing up in a video and scaring the crap out of any viewer on YouTube. So I have to choose the ones that are kind of farther back.
Hmm.
And there's probably one picture that I stumbled upon that kind of gave me pause, which was it's he had a progression of these babies there. He opened up a sack and had all the little babies in it, and then the babies start to spread out, and then eventually one of the pictures is all of these babies are no longer babies, but
They're
they're
like an
all
inch long. Yeah.
yeah, and they're all in a container together, and they've got a massive network of webs. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's intense how many are in there and how much webbing is in there. That was like, okay, I want to use this photo, but I'm gonna be careful with it because it's
Yeah.
such a cool photo.
There's like a thousand. Yeah, it's like you look at it. It's like this is not one or two spiders. This is like 1,000 or 300
Yeah.
spiders all moving over top of each other, like moving and undulating. Like if you ever played D&D and like pictured swarm of
Swarm of
spiders,
spiders.
this is what it is, right?
Mhm.
And it is actually. I will say. I've been creating D&D content around like spiders and tarantulas.
Mm.
I'm planning on putting out a spider compendium actually of like homebrew spider
Cool.
stuff that I've been working on, and it is like I don't know, I just think that there's something about the image of a spider that is instantly freaky, creepy, and terrifying that I think everybody makes them such great monsters
Hmm.
that there's that lore. It's like I don't know. I think that's partly why I like them is because they're so creepy and horrifying, and you see something, and you're like, it's like you don't want to watch, but you have to watch. And the thing that scares you, I almost want to get a little bit closer to.
Yeah.
There's that feeling. It's like the Marilyn Manson thing. It's like all these things that like everyone is like disgusted by and like don't like. He's going to embrace and make part of him.
Oh.
And that's that like and that teenage angst of like, yeah, that guy's anti whatever. That's
Yeah.
still coming through me to be like, I want to, yeah. No, not many people would want to, get close to a tarantula or have a tarantula as a pet, and that sort of, it's like the anti-pet makes it a good pet to me.
Something that has changed for me is the way I see these large eight-legged creatures is different now. If I see one, and maybe this is largely, I think this is largely due to Aram, my new outlook, but if I see one, I feel very curious. I'm not as afraid when there's only one, but when there's a lot of them, I get a little, palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy.
Yeah.
And it's definitely still there. But I think that if I interacted with a singular tarantula in person, I could be okay with it. Now, however, if you're using this to be like to touch on what's terrifying, then definitely giant versions of these creatures absolutely would be scary. Which is the whole setting in Dungeons and Dragons. You can have large skinny legged kind of like daddy long leg spiders, giant versions, or you can have fuzzy tarantula giant ones. Either way, they're
Yeah.
all going to be kind of terrifying.
It's interesting to look at like how many people get, I think, spider stuff wrong. Spiders are venomous versus poisonous. And that's
Yeah,
something that
what is
came up as well.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that? Because I didn't quite
Well,
yeah.
venomous just means basically. Well, the funny thing is, okay, spiders are often poisonous too. Like if you eat a spider and you get sick, that means it's poisonous.
Okay.
Okay. But if it bites you and injects venom into you, that's venomous. So if you're worried about like, oh, is it poisonous? It's like it might be, but just don't eat your spider. But if you have a tarantula or a spider that bites you, that means it's venomous, and all spiders and tarantulas are venomous. Scale of their venom depends on the
Right.
species,
Right.
but they're all venomous, and they all use that venom to
Right.
eat them from the inside.
I did want to spend some time talking about his business
Yeah,
aspects.
I know. This was very much like a let's be fascinated with spiders
Oh, it's
episode.
very cool. It
But
does
there
hit a
was,
limit for me.
as far as the business side of things, I really thought it was interesting that, for one, it seemed like a pretty easy model to scale up. Like he fell into the business of breeding just because he loved tarantulas, and he's like, I got to pay for these tarantulas. I better start selling some of them because I have 3 to 5 thousand. That's sort of an
Yeah.
interesting way to like stumble into a business because of your obsession. I thought that was interesting that's something that he's like out of necessity and practicality for paying for all this stuff and also to have all this stuff. I'm going to start selling tarantulas. You know, you can make between like 20 to 1,000 babies on certain types of tarantulas. Like that means that you can pretty much scale it fairly easily if you can get them to breed and have the space to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have also the assistance and support to take care of that many critters,
Yeah.
it's, I mean, 10 hours of feeding for getting everything done. That's a lot of tarantulas.
Over a week, that's not too bad though. It's like 10 hours a week on feeding
Sure.
that they'd have to spend.
Yeah,
It's
I
not,
agree.
I mean, if that's a 10-hour feeding and you can sell a couple, like here's the thing, right? Like what top end tarantula sells for say four, like female tarantula, 400 or 500 bucks. You know, babies, they're probably a lot less than that. I mean, how many of those do you need to sell for it to make sense financially to have that? Probably not too
Yeah,
many.
probably not too much, especially if you're supporting that income with social media.
Oh
And
yeah.
so that's the thing that's interesting to me. I mean, pretty much everybody that we're going to talk to has some kind of social media presence. And I mean, you kind of have to these days, but the purpose of it, like what you're doing with that outlet, with those platforms, is going to vary. And for
Yeah.
him, he is still very much going into the reels and the short videos. And he talked about doing some longer form stuff on YouTube, which he's doing a bit of that right now, I noticed, and he has been actually for a while, interspersed with some of his other hobbies that he likes. But
Yeah.
the stuff on Instagram is really, really good stuff. So
Well, it's well, and I'll just mention on something that it's interesting to see how the platform he's on is dictating the content he's making. Because when we asked him like, how do you grow or how did you grow? He's just like, I produce a reel every single day because that's what Instagram is promoting. That's what
Yeah.
Instagram wants. That's the only thing that that'll promote right now, pretty much. And you know, you go live here and there, but like really, the big thing is create reel every single day. And that has been such a consistent tip from people who are out there on Instagram trying to grow is they're just like you need to create a reel every day because that's the only thing Instagram cares about right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, and TikTok, I mean, TikTok wants 2 to 3 a day, which is nuts. But like we've talked about with TikTok and Instagram Reels, it's kind of like Scrappy is the way to go.
Yeah.
It's less about like YouTube's refined videos.
Yeah, totally. And it's also, I mean, it's better to have it done rather than be perfect and
Yeah.
just have content be. That's why I mentioned he's a great testament to the Gary V idea of document, don't create. You know, he's not spending a whole lot of time, as far as I can tell, creating these videos. It's very much just like, all right, I'm going to have someone film this, and whatever happens during that video is what happens. And watch, this is me feeding a spider. Like, he has to feed his spiders probably a little bit every day. He's going to film it. And so the difference, though, I think, is that spiders are sort of inherently interesting to watch because the people who are subscribing to you are inherently interested in the spider.
Yeah.
Versus, say, even what we're doing, where people are inherently interested in the content, which does need for us to create something in some ways, you know, like I feel like we could be documenting what we're doing in terms of, you know, creating the podcast and some of the behind the scenes and like what we're doing on a regular basis. And even this right here, this is just us chatting about what we're doing, reflecting on it. Like that is documenting our process. However, there's I think, to attract people, you like, people aren't just going to come in to be like, oh, we're just like two other humans. We have to nail it down with like, because nobody's interested in just Chris and Frank. They're interested in the content that we're putting out and why we're putting it out. So there is an extra step, I think, for a lot of people when they're not in that type of niche where the product itself is so itself the notion of interest.
What you're saying is very interesting, the idea of documenting it and sharing that documentation. But what I wonder is, in Aram's case, people he makes his documentation entertaining and educational, and people very much want to, you know, I want to learn about tarantulas as well as see them, but they want both. So in, you know, for folks like us doing something that we are, would people want to see that is a question. And I guess the answer is find out, start doing it and see if people care about it.
Yeah. And I think that there is no such thing as really bad content, you know? I mean, okay, I should rephrase that.
Yeah.
There is bad content, but what I mean by that is, one of the things that we see is if it's inauthentic, then it's bad content. But if we can remain authentic, then it's really, really good. And people will resonate with it. We'll find the right people. However, I think that we may need to be moving off of Instagram because Instagram's algorithm just generally sucks. Every single person I know who's using Instagram right now is like, Instagram is bullshit right now. Like it just is very hard to grow, very hard to get more than what you're currently getting. And they're actually trying to save things like Facebook. They're trying to save things like they're actually other places. Like you can have higher engagement sometimes through videos on Facebook than through other stuff. Like it's crazy what's going on in Instagram. It's just they've really throttled it.
Because you've been saying that for a while. I feel like the Facebook Instagram umbrella tries very hard, you know, being that it is drawing a blank, Zuckerberg. Given that it is all Zuckerberg, the idea that I shouldn't just say he, because it's a large entity. They are trying to just keep people on their two platforms. They hinder anything that links out of those two platforms. They hinder the reach and engagement, and that sucks. That sucks for content creators because they're trying to create these funnels. And if it's not easy for the customer to use your product, that just makes it no fun, no matter how much of a pull your product has or the opportunity that it gives. It makes it unfun. So once it starts to suck even more, it's like, okay, people were already thinking about leaving. And then TikTok comes along and they just say like, TikTok just makes it so much easier on many levels.
Well, the thing about TikTok is it's much easier to engage with the content, and the content itself is generally better and more addictive because the funnel for it is much bigger, much more huge, and the algorithm is more tailored. There's lots of reasons probably behind the scenes as to why that's working. But the thing that they've made, you're right, they've made it so difficult for anyone who's a creator on Instagram to monetize.
Yeah.
You know, and by the way, their bonuses program, which is what they're kind of using to incentivize, is not even offered to people who say don't live in the US right now. I'm pretty sure it's not even open to people like me who live in Canada. So
interesting.
That's another factor for someone who is, say, like a creator on Instagram trying to build something. I don't really even want to put out a lot of content there because, one, it's almost impossible to grow and not a lot of people wind up seeing it. And then even if I do, I'm not going to be put into the shared process of making money like the way that the people in the States like Aram is. And then on top of that, like they make anything that does take people off the platform throttled and much more difficult to actually do. And that means that for creators who are trying to monetize or trying to get people to buy even like a t-shirt or anything to support them where they can be able to say that, oh yeah, I'm following my passion and Instagram has been an aid for me, none of that actually matters. So it's not helping people do it. They're so concentrated on time on app, because that's their monetary value to sell ads. That's the only metric that seems to be the one that matters for Instagram, to be able to sell their ad space and target people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pay-to-play platform, and I mean, I'm okay with the idea of paying for something once we start like creating a funnel for people to actually support us or support what we're doing. But that's a whole extra step that I think a lot of people don't necessarily know how to take, or don't necessarily know how to create.
You just finished the sonnet-sized version of this episode with Frank and Chris. If you want to hear the epic version, become a member of our
awesome Nerdpreneur board.
Board members get access to all extended versions of our episodes and access to our AMA advice show where Chris and I answer your burning hot questions. Go to patreon.com/nerdpreneur to become a member of the
awesome Nerdpreneur board
for just $10 a month, or less than a cup of coffee a week. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep it nerdy.